Welcome to the latest edition of the Teamsters Podcast. I'm Kara Dennis of the Teamsters Communications Department. In this episode, we will talk about the months-long effort that went into educating and getting Teamsters out to vote in the November 3rd election, and hear from political field organizers in several key states about their experiences in helping to secure the presidency for Joe Biden. Plus, we'll get another coronavirus safety update for truckers from a representative of the National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health. But to start, I turn to my colleague Ted Gotch to learn more about the successful efforts of the Teamsters in helping the pro-worker Biden-Harris ticket, as well as other worker-friendly candidates down ballot, get elected earlier this month. It included hundreds of thousands of calls, as well as more than 1 million texts and pieces of mail to get it done. Ted?
Thanks, Kara. Back in the spring of 2019, the Teamsters committed to getting involved in the 2020 election with the goal of electing a president who would pledge to make the lives of working Americans better. The Teamsters conducted an online survey of the membership in September 2019 to find out whom they supported, and also polled union leaders as well. Meanwhile, political field organizers, or PFOs, spent weeks in the late summer and early fall of 2019 trailing candidates in Iowa, New Hampshire, South Carolina, and other key states, trying to get them on the record on the issues members cared about. The union last December even hosted a presidential candidate forum. Then in March, there was a pandemic that changed everything. Instead of working job sites, PFOs now need to reach out in other ways. Once the primary process ended and the Teamsters endorsed Joe Biden for president, the union took the lessons it learned and reached out to the membership to make sure they understood the issues and would get out to vote. 18 months later, after it all began, it was mission accomplished. I got an overview of the whole process from Katie Finn, the Teamsters National Field Director, and Tyler Longpine, the Teamsters Political Director.
So I'm joined today by Katie Finn, the National Field Director, and Tyler Longpine, the Political Director of the Teamsters. Thank you both for being on the joining us here on the podcast.
Happy to be here.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Okay, awesome. Well, so listen, just to get started, Katie, I think I'm going to direct the first question to you, if that's okay. Tell us a little bit about what went into the field program, especially for after, say, the primary process. What that looked like, how Teamsters, got involved, and sort of what are some of the things they were doing on the ground.
Right. No, absolutely. And like you said, I think we did a lot of work during the primary to try to influence the narrative and to try to make sure any candidate running for president or any elected office were addressing issues that were important to our members. And so coming into the general election, it was actually fairly simple for our union to endorse those candidates that really would have our back. And so then it was up to us to make sure we were educating our members on where the candidates stood on these issues, really what you could expect from them if they were to be elected, and then making sure not only educating them on the issues and the candidates, but also on the process of voting this go around. As we had so many members that tried voting by mail for the first time or voting in person, but early. So it was important to us to make sure that education component was there, and the best to share that message and to communicate with our members are our members. So the backbone of our program really was having members from across the country contacting their fellow Teamster members within the same local, within the same state, to make sure everyone had the information they needed to make a smart, educated vote and make sure that vote was counted.
Okay. And Tyler, just talk a little bit about the states and races, some of the states and races that were highlighted, or I guess were prioritized by the Teamsters in this election.
Yeah, obviously there was a presidential race that was sucking a lot of the oxygen out of the room, and we spent a lot of time working on that. But there are some key down ballot races that our department focused on throughout the 2020 cycle as well. Going into this cycle, we had kind of three overarching goals. The first being to elect a pro-labor president. The second was to elect a pro-labor Senate, and the third was to protect and defend the pro-labor majority in the House of Representatives. And looking at the Senate, we knew that there was a battleground of about 10 states, at its widest, in its widest assessment. But we focused in on first protecting a couple of key allies in the Senate, Senator Tina Smith in Minnesota, and Senator Gary Peters in Michigan. And we're happy that both of the senators were reelected with Teamster endorsement and Teamster support. Then we looked at states where there were incumbent senators who had failed us or who hadn't made labor and unions a priority in their time in the Senate. And we had some opportunities there looking at Colorado, looking at Arizona, looking at North Carolina, and a handful of other states where the incumbents did not have a favorable legislative record with the Teamsters and working issues for working families. And we're happy that in Colorado and Arizona, especially, we were able to oust the incumbents and elect a couple of new senators who've either through their past actions shown that they're allies of the Teamsters or made commitments to us that they will be in the future. So very happy about our victories in Colorado and Arizona. Unfortunately, we didn't get the outcome we'd hoped for in North Carolina. But looking at the House, we knew that there were a number of our allies in very competitive districts who won in the 2008 wave, the 2018 wave, that would need a lot of help getting reelected in 2020. These are freshman members, many of them in tough districts, maybe districts won by the other party, both Republicans that had our back and Democrats as well. And we're happy that we fared very well in the House battleground. Teamster endorsed candidates fared very well. We reelected 28 of our allies in these battleground districts, and unfortunately 6 lost. But all in, that's a pretty good record, 28 and 6. So we're happy that a lot of the freshmen are coming back. We're happy that we see some bipartisan support for labor in competitive districts this year and going into the next Congress. So, the down ballot could always be better. We'd always like to win more, but I think we're pretty happy with the way things broke for us on the down ballot. And of course, very happy about what happened on the presidential line.
All right. Katie, just returning to you, given the results that, obviously Tyler referenced, and also given the fact that obviously this was a very different kind of campaign year with the ongoing coronavirus pandemic, it was sort of a different process this time. Is there anything you can tell us about that and maybe what we learned from that are lessons moving forward?
Right. No, absolutely. I think we've all felt the effects of the coronavirus in all aspects of our lives. And obviously our political campaign was not free from that. And I had a conversation with a fellow Teamster member about candidates about an upcoming election to understand of those in-person, face-to-face conversations that really have been the backbone of our political programs in the past, meeting folks at their work sites, having those conversations, answering questions, in a personal way that only really Teamsters can do with Teamsters. And so obviously the realities of what this pandemic has meant that we had to adjust and adapt and get creative, which is exactly what we did. And again, I know I said earlier, but because of the many local unions across the country that identified, recruited individuals to come off as political field organizers, we were really able to run a robust, aggressive program, despite the fact that it looked very different than what we've done past. So we lean very heavily on phone calls and text messages, essentially trying to replicate what the face-to-face communication. But again, using all these fun new techno tools. But it really, we did find that having members, calling members, there were some good conversations had, and actually probably an opportunity for maybe even more honest conversations than people could sometimes have at their work sites. And it allowed us to identify members who were undecided or had concerns and questions, and to be able to work through those with them, and actually convert them from undecided supporters for our candidates we'd endorsed. So really proud of the program we ran. All told, we had over 150 political field organizers, either rank and file members from across all sorts of trades, all states, participating in this program. In addition to volunteers, activists from local unions, and IBT staff. We made 340,000 phone calls during this process. 1.2 million text messages were sent. In addition to that, we did send out mail pieces and use digital advertising. 1.3 million pieces of mail were sent out this cycle. And our digital ads had a reach of more than 360,000 members. And I think I would just say what we're pleased to see with that, our message again, support the candidates that support us and get out and vote early. We saw just that in the key battleground states. Our members were getting out and making sure their votes counted. All told, in those kind of key battleground states that Tyler mentioned, 55,000 of our members voted early. Those were votes in the bank before Election Day. And in states like Michigan and Wisconsin, where we know how important every vote is, that meant we went into Election Day with 25% of our voters already having voted. And I really do think that was the key to what was a very successful program.
All right. Well, and then Tyler, again, you sort of recapped the results, but, there is some sort of some unfinished business. I also just wondered if there were maybe some other maybe lessons learned from this cycle that you would want to talk to as well.
I'll kind of break those out. I'll cover the unfinished business first. Right now, there are 2 U.S. Senate seats that haven't been determined. Right now, the split in the Senate is 48 Democrats, 50 Republicans, with 2 to be decided, both in Georgia, both on January 5th. Kind of an unusual, unprecedented really, but an unusual election law in Georgia. Means that if a candidate doesn't clear the 50% threshold in the regular election, then they advance to a runoff. Doubled this year because a retirement in one of those seats created the need for a special election. So we have a Georgia twofer scheduled for January 5th that will ultimately decide the control of the U.S. Senate. In this case, it could result. For our part, we see an opportunity here to clear the last roadblock for passage of the Butch-Lewis Act or similar legislation to shore up our multi-employer pensions. As many of you know, the Senate has been the roadblock for resolution on this matter for a few years now, and if we can elect a Democratic majority in the Senate, we've got a road to the president's desk, and we expect President Biden would sign legislation to fix our pensions. We've also got a couple of Republicans that have signaled their support. Both the incumbents have signaled their support for national right to work legislation. Senator Loeffler going as far to co-sponsor the national right to work law. So, certainly no friend beyond the pension issue. These are our 2 incumbent senators that are not friends of workers and working families and labor unions. Ted, that was the first part of the question. Remind me what the second part of the question was. Lessons learned.
Yeah. Yes.
So I think one of the key lessons that we've been reminded